Very good. All right, Charles, you about ready to get started?
Yes, sir, we are. Well, welcome everybody to this week's session of E-Rotary Club. Philip Zimmerman is our MC and our host for today, our club president. We're actually sitting in the dark right now. I am anyway in Southern Terrebonne Parish. The only effect of the storm so far is the power going out, which it did, of course, just as we were preparing for the meeting. But thanks to technology, we're all live and connected. We have a slightly different format today, but all well, we have an excellent presenter. May I introduce Philip Zimmerman, our president.
Thank you, Charles. And we are having technological issues, as Charles indicated. It's not a disaster, but he is out of power, and we're a virtual club online, and so it's an adventure today. But welcome to the E-Rotary Coastal Club. We're so glad that you're able to join us. In the Rotary fashion, we always begin with Pledge of Allegiance and followed by the four-way test. And so I'm going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Normally we would be displaying a flag today, but obviously we're not going to be displaying a flag because Charles' computer is out, and you're seeing the Jimmy Frederick, our speaker's first opening slide. But we'll get through that. And so if you have a flag somewhere nearby, or just put it in your mind, I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next thing we do as a Rotarian in Rotarian Club is we say the four-way test. And this is a pledge of the things we think, say, and do. And it's a tradition, again, amongst all Rotary clubs, and it really speaks toward our club nature, which is service-oriented. And so the first one is, and so if you're a Rotarian, you'd like to repeat after me, you may join me. If not, just you can listen and hear the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And that is the four-way test of a Rotarian, and really of anything we think, say, or do. Those things are the core values that we hold true toward conducting anything that we're involved in. Just some little background on the club activities in the recent past. I submitted the documents to Rotary International for our club to be chartered. We have our 20 charter members. If there's anyone on the call today who's interested in joining us in E-Rotary Coastal, you can go to our homepage, erotarycoastal.org, and there's a red button up in the upper right-hand corner of our homepage. It says Join Now. And just go fill out a membership application. Charles or I will give you a call, and we'll get you involved in our club. We're a service-oriented club, and our desire is to serve the residents along coastal areas wherever they may be. Initially here in Louisiana, but we want to expand the club. We have a member in Florida. We have a member in North Carolina. So because we're virtual, we can really be anywhere. Before the meeting, I was driving down I-10 on my way to my office, came to my office, have a meeting on my cell phone. So the ability to join the meeting is very easy, and we want to encourage everyone who's listening, who's not currently Rotarian, to consider becoming a Rotarian and join us in this great adventure. Our service activity that we're going to be involved in, because Rotary is a service organization, our initial foray will be in the development of a register of organizations, for public organizations, nonprofit organizations such as our speakers organization today, and companies who are involved in any kind of coastal activities, whether that's in the restoration, planting, investigation, assessment, wetlands evaluations, and so forth, just so we can have a repository of contacts that if someone wants to get some information, they can have a one-stop shop that they can go to try to get some information. We do have a luncheon tomorrow at Jubin's, so if you're a member, we're having a lunch tomorrow at Jubin's at noon here in Baton Rouge. Love for you to join us. And if you're not a member and you're in the Baton Rouge area, please feel free to come by and visit us at the table, and then possibly join us for lunch. We'll be at Jubin's in Baton Rouge. Let me see if there's anything else. I think from an announcement perspective, that will about cover it. Let me go ahead and we'd like to start on time and end on time and give our presenters lots of time to go ahead and make their presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. He will, because of the conditions that Charles is in, he's operating on battery power on his computer and his internet is out, so he's hot-spotted to his computer through his phone. And so normally he would be at the Master Control Center, but basically we've given our speaker, Mr. Jimmy Frederick, the baton for the day. So this is the adventure of being an E-Club and overcoming challenges. And it shouldn't be really that difficult for Jimmy to take this because he is the communications director for the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana. It's the oldest state organization, statewide nonprofit organization that's dedicated to coastal restoration. And I'll allow him to describe more about what his presentation is as he gets going. And Jimmy, let me just say from us, before we start, thank you so much for being involved in an organization that has such a legacy associated with it. You were on the forefront before most of the state and definitely the nation even realized there was an issue. So thank you for serving the citizens of Louisiana in your efforts. And with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you, Jimmy, and looking forward to what you have to say.
Phil, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Please let me know if I'm yelling or not talking loud enough. I have a tendency I would like to say thank you for allowing me to be with you guys. It was such an interesting concept that you guys have here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I have a feeling that my presentation is going to be a little simplistic for the amount of knowledge that I have a feeling is on the phone with us today, but nonetheless, it'll give you an overview of the problem that we're facing, the way that we've been facing it, the way we're dealing with it, and then, of course, as a coastal organization that we are, the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, kind of how we're dealing with it as a nonprofit. And as Philip said, we are the oldest nonprofit coastal organization, and it's a statewide organization. There are a lot of wonderful groups that we work with that are very geographic specific, such as the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation and BITNEP and some of the other ones that I know you're all familiar with. But we actually deal with the coast of Louisiana from the Texas border to the Mississippi border. And our mission is to drive bold science-based action to restore coastal Louisiana through outreach, advocacy, and restoration. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just a quick little background on myself. I come to this as a very much a lay person. I am a fisherman, but I'm actually a sportscaster by trade. For 20 years, I was radio and television sportscaster and some part-time news reporter and things like that. But so I come to this as someone who is concerned about the coast, and in my job, it is hopefully to translate some of this great scientific knowledge that we have and get it out to a wider audience. So that's just a brief little background on myself. We'll get started here. Maybe we'll get started here. There we go. This is just actually a fairly old map of Louisiana. I say old, it's since, I believe, 2010. We're supposed to have a new GIS map coming out this week, hopefully. That's going to be an updated version from the United States Geological Survey. So USGS is supposed to be putting out a new map. But that just gives you an idea of kind of what Louisiana looks like, and it's probably not an accurate image anymore. And then, again, the computer's a little slow for some reason.
That's just going through Charles's cell phone, probably.
The next slide that you see is white at the moment, but it is supposed to tell you and show you what we can expect in year 2100 if we do nothing. And what it shows basically is that Baton Rouge is almost beachfront property, and all we have is the finger of New Orleans where the levees have levied off the river and protect the communities there. This is going to be a video that we put together here at the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, and there's no audio, so I'm just going to talk through it with you. But what it describes is basically a microcosm of what Louisiana is dealing with from the Barataria Basin. Barataria Basin is really south of New Orleans and west of New Orleans, it really contained all the different types of restoration projects that Louisiana has to have for us to rebuild land. What this is showing you is some of the time frame and some overall video. And if we do nothing, it shows that we could lose as much as the Mobile, Alabama, if we don't do something. This is Mr. Roland Phillips. What he's saying right here is this used to be dry land. We used to trap muskrats and otters and everything else, and now here we are riding on the boat. And that's just how things have changed so dramatically on our coast. You see here from 1932 to the year 2010, things have changed. That's just a former barrier island that has just completely just been destroyed. Now, again, I'm going through this pretty quickly. The video is much better.
I got to fast forward.
I think we probably should. Why don't we skip the video?
No,
just fast forward through it a little bit.
No, you were good. No, I thought it was fast forwarding. Don't mind my comment. Just keep it going.
No, well, maybe we can do it this way. Instead of me trying to describe every frame of the video, which is silly on my end because I don't. Master plan, very, very important. We'll talk about it more in just a little bit. But it began in 2007. The fascinating thing for me that Louisiana has a comprehensive master plan for a sustainable coast is that Louisiana has a master plan for a sustainable coast and has had for the last 10 years. It is a true blueprint using the best available science for us to focus on how we're going to restore Louisiana's coast, and also how we are going to help with flood risk reduction. There's no such thing as being of actually preventing floods, unfortunately, at least not that we can find. But the best way that we can mitigate them is what we need to be worried about and working on. Here you see the Barataria Basin, how it actually is defined. That is, this is really not working very well. But you can see you have shoreline protection, ridge creation, marsh creation, barrier island restoration. Those are 4 of the main types of coastal restoration projects, and all of these are being employed in the Barataria Basin as we speak. This is East Grand Terre Island. It has been completely rebuilt through a dredging process of them taking sand from offshore and pumping it on to East Grand Terre, which is one of our barrier islands. Of course, Grand Isle is the only inhabited barrier island at the moment, and they have really suffered a little bit. And I say a little bit, they've suffered a great deal from this little storm, and we consider Cindy, I'm sure most of you all do, consider it a small storm. It was a tropical system. It did get up to become a tropical storm with, I think, 60-mile-an-hour winds at some point. But the point is that Grand Isle has been inundated with water, and what they call the Burrito Levee has really suffered from just the storm that we've had come in, and it didn't even come close to making landfall at Grand Isle. That, just so you know, that is our outreach director. He is a social scientist. His name is Corey Miller. What's fascinating about Corey is that very few organizations of our type have a social scientist on staff. We all have scientists. We all have ecologists and biologists and environmental engineers and things like that we work with and have on staff. But Corey works directly with the communities that are most affected by coastal land loss, and also the communities that are going to be affected by the projects that must be built to protect our land and protect our coast. Because there are going to be some great benefits, but there are also going to be some things that we have to take into account that are going to detrimentally affect some folks, and we need to be prepared and we need to be honest about that. And that's what Corey works on day in and day out, and he has done a tremendous job with that. Here you see in the Mississippi River, this is the dredging process where they are actually dredging the Mississippi River, pumping the sediment 6 to 10 miles over highways, over levees, under railways, and they're building the DuPont Marsh and Ridge Creation Project, which has built 1,000 acres of land, or a little bit more than that, 1,500 acres of land, and you see the tremendous amount of heavy equipment and all that is going on right there. And what is interesting to me is it looks like such a vast area of land, and it is. But when you pull out on like a Google Earth image, it is such a speck of land. It just really it is hard to believe that those giant tractors can be part of that big marsh creation project, and yet it's still such a small bit of land that we're building. Marsh creation and ridge restoration are very important, but they are also very expensive. It costs about $1 million an acre, and they're not sustainable without having to come back and pump sediment back into the land itself. The one thing I didn't mention as we got into this video is some of the reasons for the problems that we're having. Louisiana, geologically, is built, as all of you know, built by the Mississippi River, basically, acting as a hose. When it was, for thousands of years, it was not leveed, it was not confined, so it would flow back and forth over time, just like a giant garden hose that's got a full pressure of water on it and nobody's holding it, and it would build land, and it would keep up with the fact that Louisiana is also sinking. The geology of Louisiana is such that we're built on mud and sand and silt, so as the sediment and silt compresses, we sink. Some of the other factors, of course, are the fact that oil and gas canals have been cut through what once was solid land, was marsh. And once you do that, it allows saltwater intrusion to become much more prevalent. It also just simply makes it easier for wave action to erode the land itself. So certainly there are natural causes for our land loss crisis, and there are some definite human causes as well. One of the big, this is a freshwater diversion. Actually, excuse me, this is a siphon, where they're actually pumping fresh water from the Mississippi River into the surrounding marsh. And then we get into, we'll talk a little bit more about this, the major sediment diversions, which means that the reason that, as we just mentioned, the fact that Louisiana's marsh is being starved is because the sediment-rich Mississippi River is no longer allowed to overflow its banks like it once was and to replenish the marsh. So as the marsh would sink and die off a little bit, there would always be fresh water and new sediment to build up and keep up with sea level rise. That is no longer the case. The major cornerstones of our master plan, the state master plan, are sediment diversions, and these are monstrous engineering feats, the biggest in the world, and quite possibly the most important engineering feat that is tied to climate change and land loss in the nation and maybe the world. We are in the process of permitting that. I say we. I don't mean to take credit where the state is actually doing all the work, but as a state, we're in the process of working with the Army Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies to permit what is going to be the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion and then the Mid-Breton sediment diversion. Both of those, it'll be Mid-Barataria first. The governor and Chairman Bradbury, Johnny Bradbury of CPRA, was hoping to permit it and start breaking ground on the sediment diversion by 2020. I know you guys had Mark Wingate on a couple of weeks ago or a month or so ago. It looks like it may take us a little bit longer to get the permitting process taken care of. We are pushing, as an organization, CRCL is pushing for the federal government to get some of that red tape out of the way so we can permit this much quicker and get to breaking ground on it sooner. CRCL has been calling for sediment diversions, basically harnessing the power of the Mississippi River to once again mimic our natural process that built Louisiana since 1989 in our first report called Here Today, Gone Tomorrow. It's taken us that long to get to this point, and now we're on the verge of quite possibly having a sediment diversion going in, or at least constructed, but we're still working through that process. We certainly are not advocating skipping environmental steps. We just want those steps to be sped up. That's the gist of the video, and I truly encourage you to please go see it for yourself. It's on our website at crcl.org. It is a beautiful video, just with the pictures and the music and the sound, and I think it'll do a much better job of explaining some more of the different types of restoration, which we will talk about in just a minute. This next slide shows you just how important the Mississippi River is to the nation as a whole. All that's red shows that the Mississippi River Valley or basin and watershed drains 31 states from the United States, which is amazing when you look at a graphic like that. This was Buras, which is south of New Orleans, in 1932. Almost complete, full land with very little open water. In 2006, the only thing left are some fingers of land and open water. So basically, Buras, the only thing left is right where the levee is, and that's all that's left from the fact that all that wetland area, all the land had no nourishment because of the leveeing of the Mississippi River and containing the river. And again, we had to do that. I mean, we have to protect New Orleans. We have to protect the communities along the Mississippi River. There's a National Geographic article from 1897 that predicted exactly what was going to happen if we levied off the Mississippi River, which is the fact that we will lose most of coastal Louisiana. So we engineered ourselves into this problem, and now we're working to engineer ourselves out of it. Sea level rise is something that is definitely a factor here for Louisiana. I don't know if some of you read some of the articles that came out after a study that was released last week from Tulane, saying that Louisiana is sinking at 4 times the global average. And so it means that our relative sea level rise, the fact that Louisiana continues to sink and sea level is coming up, is something that is happening at a much greater rate here in Louisiana than just about anywhere else in the world. We are really on the precipice of the situation dealing with sea level rise and coastal communities. In the 2012 master plan, the low, if you want to call it that, the low scenario, which would be over the next 50 years, a 1.41 foot rise of sea level, was the worst case scenario that we were planning for in 2012. Now, it is the best case scenario that we're planning for. As you see, we could see sea level rise of 2.72 feet over the next 50 years, which would really be a major problem. But the key is that we are planning for that, and that is something that we had not done up until this point. The projected land loss here, if nothing is done, you'll see over the next 50 years, this is the low scenario. All the red will be gone. And this is just locally with the land change. I say locally, this is in the southeastern part of the state over the next 50 years. We always talk about all that we're losing and all the hard scrabble work that has to be done, all the billions of dollars that we have to amass so that we can do the projects that we expect or that we need to do. But we have made some progress, and I think it's worth noting, and these come from CPRA, $20 billion over the last decade or so for 20 coastal parishes, 120 million cubic yards of fill used, 36,000 acres of land benefited, 282 miles of levee improvements, and 60 miles of barrier islands constructed or under construction. And that's something that we need to celebrate. We need to be mindful of the fact that we are making progress. We always talk about the doom and gloom of things, and that's not always the case. People often ask me, why does it matter? Why does Louisiana's coast, why is it so important? Well, besides the fact that we live here, and that, quite frankly, I'm personally partial to Louisiana and our way of life and our food and our culture, Louisiana is an incredibly important state. And I'm just going to give you a few facts about what actually happens on the coast of Louisiana. First of all, 70% of migratory waterfowl in North America either winter or stop over here. We're the top tonnage of seafood landings in the contiguous U.S. 90% of all Gulf marine species. Now, this is important. From Florida to Texas are estuarine dependent, which means we have to have an estuary, a healthy estuary, which is the mixing of the salt water of the Gulf and the fresh water of the inland rivers and distributaries. Habit in Louisiana. It's in Louisiana. 90%. That's huge. 50% of the nation's wild shrimp crop is caught here. 35% of the nation's blue claw crab are caught here, and 40% of its oysters. All 110 species of neotropical migrating birds use South Louisiana. Not bad. This is a graphic that we have also on our website. It shows what a healthy estuary looks like in all the different species. And, of course, this isn't all the species that utilize a healthy estuary. But at some point in their life cycle, except maybe the bear. I'm not sure why the bear made it on the estuary graphic. But, it's an important aspect that the Louisiana black bear is now off the endangered species list, which is nice. Economically, second leading domestic producer of oil and gas. 90% of the nation's energy production comes through our coast. 20% of the nation's natural gas output. 50% of the nation's refining capacity is here on the coast of Louisiana. When Katrina hit in 2005, oil and gas production was knocked out for 3 days. The average price of gasoline rose 46 cents, which was tremendous. It's the top tonnage port in the nation, one of the largest in the world. In fact, we have more shipping tonnage in Louisiana's ports, in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, a couple of others, anywhere in the entire Western Hemisphere. When I heard that stat, the first thing I thought about, well, what about Long Beach, California, and what about New Jersey? And the difference is that the ships come into our ports full, and they also leave full because of all of the transport that is going through our ports, including 60% of the nation's grain and a lot of the nation's coal exports go through our area. Those other ports, those other giant ports, all the ships come in full, but they leave empty. So that's where the tonnage issue is different. And then a recent RAND study said that Louisiana's coast averages 5.8 billion to 7.4 billion of annual output, and that's at risk with just one storm. These next 4 slides I just found very interesting. These are the shipping routes or trucking flows from several different regions. You see where New York seems pretty significant, Houston also significant. There's Long Beach, California, Los Angeles, and then Louisiana. Every corner of our country has some connection to Louisiana and to Louisiana's commerce and to Louisiana's transportation hubs. And that, to me, is something that is quite an interesting little graphic when you see it presented that way. Now the future. As we talked about, the Louisiana's comprehensive master plan first developed in 2007. Every 5 years it is updated, so we're in the 3rd iteration. 2017's Coastal Master Plan has 120 projects in it, and it is estimated to cost at the moment $50 billion over the next 50 years. The foresight that was shown when the first master plan was developed in 2007 forced the legislature to give it an up or down vote. So there was no legislator from any part of the state can say, I want this project in, or I want that project in, or I'm not voting for it. So it just doesn't do it. It doesn't work that way. You're either up or down. And it was unanimously passed by both houses of the legislature. And because it is a resolution, it does not need to be signed by the governor. Not that it would certainly be signed, but it doesn't need to be. Multiple lines of defense, we talked about it a little bit. All of this has to work together. You have barrier islands, then you have the land bridge, which would be marsh creation, and the natural ridges. And then, of course, we have floodgates and pumping stations, and all of this to ensure that our communities, both coastal and inland, are protected as much as possible. And this is an interesting week to be talking and doing this presentation due to the fact that we had a tropical storm come through our area, come through our state. It was a minuscule tropical storm compared to, say, Hurricane Katrina or just a hurricane in general. and it has caused a great deal of damage, especially when you look at the amount of sand and beach that's going to be eroded in the southwestern part of the state. They're really going to be hit hard. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Grand Isle is dealing with some serious erosion issues just from this small tropical storm. And then all the water that is pushed up, Highway 82 in Cameron Parish, basically the only lifeline in and out of Cameron Parish, is completely inundated, along with Highway 1 in the southeastern part of the state. Restoration strategies, we have dredging, which would be marsh creation, ridge restoration, and barrier island restoration. We want to reconnect natural processes, which will be sediment diversion, harnessing the power of the Mississippi River, hydrologic restoration, so that there is good flow the way it's supposed to flow tidally through our marshes and through the estuary, so that we restore the natural flow of the water as it was intended to be. And that's something that's important, especially in the southwestern part of the state. And because right now all of that saltwater intrusion is so very detrimental to marsh and estuary production in the southwestern part of the state. And then something that we advocate for very much is oyster reef restoration, because there's so many different things, and we have our oyster recycling program, which I'll tell you about in a second. And then, of course, shoreline protection. And shoreline protection, everybody says, well, why don't we just rock it? Why don't we just put rocks down everywhere? Well, in theory, that's fine. One, it's very, very, very expensive, and sometimes geologically it just doesn't work because of the fact that the rocks are so heavy and there's nothing for them to sit on, so they just continue to sink, and you have to continue to build more. There are certainly important. There are important aspects of all of these. That's why we talk about the multiple lines of defense and the fact that all these things have to work together. You'll hear a lot of people say that, why don't we just dredge everything? Why don't we just build marsh wherever we want it? And we certainly think that's a great idea. It's just not something that can be done by itself. It's not sustainable by itself. Master plan without action. This is the low scenario, where we have a sea level rise of about 1.5 feet over the course of 50 years. The medium scenario, you see a lot more red. And then high scenario, which is what more and more people are predicting of as time progresses. We see even on up into Lake Maurepas area and the North Shore being heavily affected by coastal erosion. Now, we certainly have a plan to help fix a lot of this, but not all of it. And that's another aspect that has to be, I think, mentioned, is that we can't, no matter how many projects we do, we can't save all of Louisiana, coastal Louisiana. We're going to have to make some really strategic decisions, and people are going to be affected, and we have to have real political will and leadership that is going to be able to allow us to make the decisions that have to be made and also be honest with people. And that's where I think CRCL has been on the forefront of really trying to understand what the issues are, what the communities are dealing with, what they expect to be dealing with, not telling them they're wrong, because 90% of the time they're not. We just need to hopefully help the communities that are going to be affected, whether it be a shrimper or an oysterman or someone who owns land in Lafitte, have them understand what's going on, how the state is going to help them get through it over time, and then how we can work together to understand that we have to do these things, or Louisiana is in even more trouble than it already is. These are just some of the projects in the southeastern part of the state that we're expecting over the next 10 to 15 years. 2 sediment diversions, as we talked about, the Mid-Barataria and the Mid-Breton. 2 marsh creations, the large-scale Barataria and the lower Barataria marsh creation project. These are big time pumping projects of sediment. Shoreline protection, and then 5 ridge restorations. And when you see the first implementation, that's basically in the first 10 years or 15 years of the current master plan. All of that could change over in the next 5 years when we redo the master plan. And then, of course, the barrier islands, which are very essential to the health of Louisiana. This is just an artist's rendition of what a sediment diversion might look like when you basically put a hole in the levee and then you build these culverts so that then as the water, as it is, at certain times when the water level is right, they'll open up the diversion, and they are still working on how to effectively manage these diversions. But that's basically what it would look like, and then it would flow at times into the marsh, and over time will build land and feed the starving wetlands that we have behind it. And then we get to CRCL. I already mentioned our mission. We drive bold science-based action through outreach, restoration, and advocacy, a real three-pronged approach. I talked to you about what Corey Miller does as our social scientist on staff, talking to the communities that are most affected, and just people in general, so that people understand exactly what we're going to be dealing with. Restoration is where I think CRCL is most unique. The Habitat Restoration Program began in 2000, and what we do is we get volunteers to go out and be a part of actually restoring some of Louisiana's coastline, whether it be through marsh plantings that you see there, dune plantings. There's some marsh. We have engaged more than 13,000 volunteers. You see some before and after pictures. These are some reclaimed oil and gas canals that we planted with the proper species of vegetation, and they've really taken to it very, very well. Big branch. The idea is that we don't think that the volunteers are going to go out and save the coast of Louisiana. It really is a twofold process. There really is some benefit to what we're doing. Over time, this vegetation probably would have taken hold itself, but we were able to give it a helping hand. And the other idea is that we're able to get people to see that they can make a difference. We often talk about these giant platitudes, these giant construction projects that are going to cost billions of dollars. And how do I, as a one person or as a group of people, make a difference? Well, this is how we do it, and it has been very effective, and we have had some real successes over the 16 or 17 years that we've been doing this. And then we also do beach restoration, and you see some sand fencing. We were supposed to be on the beach of Cameron Parish on Saturday. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but we will be there on July 8th to do the planting and the dune restoration that we expected to do this weekend. And then we have our oyster shell recycling program. This has been something that has been fun to get off the ground. It's the only one in the state of Louisiana, which is kind of hard to believe when you think about the fact that we have 40% of the nation's oyster landings, and most of the shell goes right into Louisiana landfills from across the state. We kicked off the pilot program in New Orleans. We started off with 12 restaurants, and we became the largest oyster shell recycling program in the country with 12 restaurants. Formerly, the largest the recycling program was in the Chesapeake Bay area, and they had 236 restaurants in their program. So we eat a lot of oysters in Louisiana, so it's really nice to see. We've collected more than 5 million pounds so far, and we currently have 13 participating restaurants. It's all in the New Orleans area at the moment. We're trying to figure out a way to make it more sustainable. It's a very expensive process when you think about collecting oyster shell in special bins behind restaurants, due to the fact that, number one, no restaurant wants their oyster shells to be sitting at their restaurant for more than a day. And then secondly, we have to cart all the shell to Buras, which is quite a long ways from New Orleans as a truck drives, and they have to cure for 6 months in the sun so that it gets rid of the bacteria and any food particles that may be left. And then we have volunteers come help us bag the shell and get it into gabion baskets, which are basically just large metal baskets. And we have deployed our first oyster shell reef, our recycled oyster reef, in the Biloxi Marsh, which is in St. Bernard Parish, in November, and it is already making a difference in terms of erosion. The reason we decided to put it in the Biloxi Marsh were a couple of reasons. One, we partnered with the Nature Conservancy, and they are doing 3 different types of oyster shell reefs in that area, trying to see which one works best. Oysters love to set, the little baby oysters called spat, like to set on preferably old oyster shell. They certainly do it on crushed concrete and limestone. So anyway, the point is that it's a little bit of a controlled area so that we can see just how effective the reef is, and so far it has been effective. And we can also knock down the wave action, because in that Biloxi Marsh area in Lake Atanasio, it is a very high wave action, and the marsh is eroding at an alarming rate. So it's only been there for about 6 months. We expect some oyster growth over the course of the next few years, and we're excited to see how that goes. And of course, we have a lot more oyster shell to get into the water. This was also going to be a quick little oyster video, which I think we can actually play. You don't really need the video, the audio on this one. This is the construction of the oyster reef. Some great video from our drone that we use to monitor our plantings, and also to just to make cool stuff sometimes. And those are the gabion baskets. You see the big gabion baskets there. Each weigh 2 tons. There's a geo fabric that they put down before they set the gabion baskets in, so that it didn't sink into the marsh. These baskets are not biodegradable. They were designed to withstand and stay together for a very long time. The idea is that over time, you won't even see the basket anymore, because oyster growth will take over and it will become a living shoreline. The other part of what we do is our advocacy work, and that is where we work with the legislature, with federal agencies, with our decision makers, and we put on the very first Coastal Issues Forum in the 2015 governor's race. We had all the 4 major candidates there, which was nice, and they all committed to coastal Louisiana. And then we have our State of the Coast Conference, which hopefully, if you're not familiar with it, and you will join us in June of 2018. We just had our 4th annual in 2016, biennial, excuse me. In 2016, it's the largest gathering of coastal professionals, industry leaders, and decision makers. And it really is. It was my first foray into that conference, and it was something to behold. It really was. And so we're expecting an even bigger one in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, that is basically the gist of it.
Well, thank you, Jimmy, for that presentation. It was fantastic. And again, I watched your video earlier after we had our first discussion. And I do encourage everyone to go to the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana's website and watch that video that he was going through initially. It is quite amazing, the level of effort that you have done as an organization to really put together a great story as far as what is occurring on the coast, and then to actually be the hands-on individuals who are going back into the coastal areas and doing volunteer planting and service activities. I know that you had, I think on your website, in fact, you list your volunteer opportunities, and you request people online, if they'd like to join you, to go ahead and to join you at those locations. So I also encourage our listeners today, if you haven't gone to the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana website, do so and volunteer. That's something that Charles and I will help discuss as a club, and see if we can join you out there on one of those plantings, and to get that hands-on
we would love that
effect. Yes.
Sure.
Charles, if you can unmute I guess on your side, Jim, if you can unmute your phones. If there's anyone on the phone that would like to ask Jimmy a question, the table is now open.
Sorry.
Any questions for anyone?
Jimmy, this is Charles. Again, our group probably tires me saying this, but just organizing the landowners more comprehensively and more systematically, I think, is an untapped opportunity. And I'm not speaking about a big oil company with millions of acres of lease, but I'm talking about me with my 70 acres and my neighbor with his 13 acres and such. And because I know the landowners have a willingness and a deep vested interest to restore and protect wetlands. And for example, we had 16 commercial alligator farmers with us past week coming from Vermilion Parish, and they harvest the eggs and they grow them and hatch them and process the alligators, whatever they do. But the point is, the owner of that operation said to me, he said, this is a win-win because we derive commercial value by a healthy marsh where alligators live and make nests and lay eggs, and the landowners realize the economic value as well, and they in turn self-protect, self-restore the land because they recognize the economic value of it. So that's one side, just and kind of in a related matter is that even with the water that's overtopping the banks of Bayou Large right now, basically from my front porch, everything looks fine. I've got healthy cypress trees and oak trees and everything like that, but it's just beyond those boundaries that you realize how stark and how dramatic the changes are. I believe that the people of Louisiana still don't get it. And in fact, one of our previous speakers said that they polled and asked how many people thought that Louisiana was a coastal state, and very few even identified us as being a coastal state, as compared to, say, a Florida or a California or whatever. My point is that despite the knowledge that we have that's growing and growing and growing, and despite the advocacy, I think we still don't completely get it internally, which means that our hurdle is all the greater externally to help people understand what we do. And if, there are some things that every Louisianian knows, like what's the difference between, gumbo from Abbeville and a gumbo from south of Fouche? Why is Tabasco at every restaurant? What's the difference between the Mardi Gras? Those, little small things that you just know if you're from Louisiana. But I don't think we know those same things about the marsh grass or about the various things that you do. Anyway, you've done a fantastic job of organizing the information, very consumable. But anyway, organizing the small landowners or all the landowners, providing technical help and perhaps resources, physical resources, and then continue to really embed this idea within our hearts and our minds. And in fact, again, knowing some of the fishermen, oyster fishermen, and others, trust me, they don't get it. They still don't care for the land and the water as comprehensively as they might. They just think it's an infinite resource that'll always be there.
Right.
Anyway, that's enough of that. But anyway, it's just something I see over and over again, and I think it's an untapped resource.
I think the fact of organizing smaller landowners, because we do work with a lot of the big landowners, and it's very easy to get with Vermilion Corp or McElhenney's or whoever to do some major restoration work, but cobbling together people like yourselves and your neighbors and then getting some restoration work there, whether it's, like you said, whether it's guidance or actual work, could be very, very beneficial to our coast, and I think that's a great idea.
Well, and there's precedence of that, with like the Road Home Initiative and the post-Katrina, post-BP initiatives, where they dealt with small homeowners or whatever, whatever it might be. So there's precedence of doing post-disaster reclamation work for a different purpose. And again, I think the model is built. I just think it'd be very compelling. But it would also give us, if we were chest deep in water, sticking marsh grass in the ground, we'll never forget that experience, never. And we'll talk about it to our friends and our family. We'll encourage them to be involved. We'll develop a sense of ownership and pride beyond what we have just as residents of Louisiana. So again, I think there's a lot to be had, on a micro level, if you will, that in aggregate would have a tremendous impact.
Agreed. And as you mentioned about not really understanding, even here in Louisiana, when we polled the state, and 88% of the people polled from, even up in Shreveport and everywhere, said that Louisiana's coast is important to save. But we have found that you ask somebody in New Orleans if they're a coastal city, and they absolutely have no concept that New Orleans is a coastal city, and that's where we get into the problem where if New Orleans doesn't understand it, people in Baton Rouge surely don't get it, and it's just a matter of us doing a better job of telling the story, I think, as you've said, and really, I still get to the point where it's about somehow figuring out a way to tell the stories that is not talking about billions of dollars of infrastructure construction. It's about what we're losing and who's being affected and things like that. And so I still think we have to do a better job of telling that human side of coastal restoration and how important Louisiana is, as you said. I did an interview with the Voice of America just yesterday, and the reporter asked me, why should we care that Louisiana is sinking into the Gulf of Mexico? And I went through all the aspects of how important Louisiana is to the country and to the world and blah, blah, blah. And then, at the bottom line, it's just a matter of Louisiana is Louisiana, and there's no other place like it, and it's worth saving. Bottom line. Anyway, I'm getting off my high horse there.
Any other questions? If you have a question, you can unmute your phone and ask Jimmy a question.
Hey, Jim, it's Tyler Artigo. How you doing?
Hey, Tyler, how you doing, man? You better not have been fact-checking me completely on all that, huh?
Sending you a full report coming up.
That was a joke.
You mentioned a new study with subsidence rates, and I'm actually looking at that this morning for a mitigation bank I'm working on. But what are people saying? Looking at the 2022 master plan, it seems like every time a report comes out, the situation gets much more dire. I mean, how's that affecting planning and perspective?
Well, I personally, I think that's I don't know that it's been completely digested yet, and I think we just got through the 2017 plan. I know that that planning, and for us, we haven't quite looked into the 2022 yet, but I know it's going to be a factor. And I think the fact that the CPRA took into account the different sea level rise scenarios that they didn't necessarily take into account in 2012 really shows that the state as an agency, or as CPRA as a state agency, is really taking sea level rise into account. And I think it's even going to be more of a factor with the new study that's come out, and I'm sure there's going to be more as we get into the next phase of planning and working toward the next iteration of the plan. You're into it a lot more than I am. I would love to know your thoughts on what the study said. I haven't read it completely, but it certainly is a dire prediction.
Yeah. So at the one site that I was looking at, the ranges of subsidence that they looked at were actually within the brackets defined in the 2017 master plan, so that was encouraging. The sea level component keeps getting worse, and so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Working on, and maybe this is something we could do together, ways of making something like a barrier reef as an alternative or a complement to marsh creation. So instead of a long linear reef feature, would be a big, probably sort of hilly or pimple mound looking thing to have similar effects. That might be an alternative or a complement.
Full disclosure, Tyler is the engineer that developed our oyster reef, and we have been working with Tyler for a while, and we certainly enjoy doing that. And Tyler, you and I have been talking a little bit, and some of the ideas that you have already in place or getting ready to have in place are really exciting. So I'm looking forward to learning more from you.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? I do want to mention, every Jimmy, and by the way, if you have a desire to join our club, we'd love to have you as a member.
Absolutely. I just haven't done it yet, but I will. And
but every one of our presentations, the amazing thing for myself, and I know that Charles shares in this, because we've by virtue of being the officers in the club and running the meeting, we've actually attended every meeting. And it's like every meeting we see something new in someone's slide presentation that we haven't seen before. I think, for me, the graphic that is remaining in my mind is when you showed the trucking patterns of these major cities in the United States. And yes, they were kind of impressive. And then when you hit Louisiana's trucking pattern, it was like, oh my gosh, I have never personally seen that. And I look at a lot of stuff, and so that is dramatic. And so when you realize the influence that Louisiana has in the country as far as what we're exporting, and I guess that's everything. Everything that comes in the port of Louisiana or the port of Lake Charles, port of Baton Rouge, is going somewhere by rail or by truck. And that was an amazing, absolutely amazing diagram. I'd I'd encourage you to somehow get that out publicly. That's the impact to our country, is if we lose the abundance of resources that we have, it'll be felt across the entire country.
Absolutely, and I felt the same way the first time I saw it. And Bob Marshall, who is formerly with the Lens and also with the Times-Picayune, is the one that shared those graphics with me, and it was quite an interesting, like you said, story to tell that I don't think we tell very well.
Anyone else? All right. Not having any other questions, we do like to end on time, and if we get to end early, that's fantastic. Jimmy, let me again thank you on behalf of the Rotary Coastal Club for your presentation and the discussion you presented today. Again, I want to encourage all of our attendees to go to the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, check out their website. If you need to get in contact with Jimmy, his information is there on the website, and that's in fact how I got in contact with him initially. And so I do want to encourage you to do that. And Jimmy, I do want to say that from a sportscaster perspective, I've never been a sportscaster, but you have a great voice.
Thank you.
Project well, and I just expected you somewhere in there to say, he's at the 10, he's at the touchdown.
Way back, he's going way back.
Yeah. It was a great presentation. Charles, I'll let you close this out for the day, and we'll be done.
Well, as always, we appreciate everybody's time and attention and interest in the topic. Please watch your email for our next speaker, and please join us at Jubilance tomorrow at noon in Baton Rouge if you can. And as Philip says, if you're not officially part of our club, please consider doing so, and also consider other people that would, be part of this topic. With that, we thank you. Glad everybody's safe after the storm, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Thank you. All right, bye-bye.